Today we're reviewing a few hands that I played at the Vic in London at a 1-3 game. Here we have a limp, hijack, raises to 10, and we have an easy 3-bet on the button with pocket queens. The big blind cold calls our 3-bet, limper folds, and the hijack calls as well. 10-5 deuce rainbow, normally in a heads-up pot, this would be a situation where I either check or bet big, but we're here in exploitative territory against two recreational players, so I thought that a small bet would be best. In hindsight, I think maybe I should have gone something like 50 or 55, more like half pot, but not to worry. Big blind folds and the hijack calls. Now the board pairs, which is obviously not ideal. However, the player in the hijack doesn't have a lot of 10s in his range, so I'm happy to keep betting. I don't want to make it too big because I want to get called by 6s through 9s, maybe something like ace-5 or even ace-king potentially, so I'm happy to go about half pot. Again, I could have gone a little bit bigger. And now he calls, and the river is pretty much a brick. I mean, ace-4 gets there, but how much ace-4 does he have? It's not impossible, but still not very likely. But he snap bets 100 here. And so just think what you would do here. What does this mean? How strong is his hand when he does that? Well, first of all, we have to establish, does he have any bluffs here? And I think there are no bluffs. Like, what would be a bluff? He just can't really have it. Unless he had something like ace-king that he turns into a bluff here now, he does not have any bluffs. However, how strong is it when he bets 100 into 339? Well, on the one hand, 100 is a big bet for a 1-3 games, even if it doesn't look like it as a stack to pot ratio, but it is a fairly big bet. Not a lot of recreational players will bet big with a small hand here. However, in relation to the pot, as I said, it is very small. It's not even a third pot. So if he has a 10, does he go that small? And I don't think so. I think he would either have check raised the turn or he would donk bigger here. Now, when I was in the game there, I didn't quite read it right. I thought, well, I can't fold here, but I just thought, well, he will have a 10 quite often. But no, I do not think now that he has a 10 very often, and so we have to call. Yes, he could have slow played aces or kings here, but even then we definitely have to call. No other play here. We call, and he shows up with pocket 6s. This is something recreational players do a lot. They call 2 streets and then they panic on the river. They don't want to get bluffed, but then they don't realize that they will not get called by worse. So this is like a real polarization mistake of the hijack here, and we win a nice little pot. Off to the next one. We have pocket 4s here. We open them to 10, button calls and big blind calls. Flop 5-5 deuce. You could fire a c-bet here to fold out over cards, but with a player behind me and against 2 players, I decided to just check. It checks through, and now we have an open ender. The big blind checks again, so now everyone's had a chance to bet. No one has bet. I bet about half pot. Button folds. Big blind calls again, and now the 8 of heart comes in and he pots it. Now this is different to the previous hand where the villain went less than a third. This villain now pots it when the heart comes in. So could he be bluffing? Yes, I wouldn't rule it out. Maybe he has ace high with the ace of hearts or something like that. He now bluffs. However, bluffing for pot after I bet the previous street just seems rather unlikely. But we have to be good 33% of the time, and we're definitely good some portion of the time. I just don't think we're good that often against a recreational player who takes this line with a pot bet on the river, so I opted to fold, but I will never know what big blind had. In this next hand, we see another big mistake that recreational players make. So here he opens for 15 under the gun. I have ace-9 suited in the small blind, and yes, I called here. And the reason is twofold. Firstly, I don't want to 3-bet an under the gun player necessarily, especially if he's a fish and he will call. I would do that with a better hand, but not with ace-9 suited. Secondly, I do really want to play a pot against him, and yes, even if he makes it 5 big blinds, I will do it. And thirdly, I had a passive big blind, and I did not expect him to squeeze here, and indeed he folds. So we go heads up to the flop, and look at this, we just flop the nuts. We naturally check to the aggressor, and he goes big here. He goes 30 into 33. So this means that he most likely has a really good hand if he pots it here. So I think maybe I should have just check raised here, but I thought this kind of player, he just won't really stop betting here if he has a set or aces or something like that. So I just called here, hoping that he would fire the turn again. And look at this, he fires the turn again. He doesn't go pot now, but he still goes about 80% pot, still way too big on both streets. Whatever hand he has, it absolutely doesn't matter whether he has a bluff, a marginal showdown hand, or big value. He should never ever go that big on both of those streets, but he does. And at this point I'm thinking, well, he really showed strength, he might have a set here. I am just going for a big raise here. I could have gone for glory and just shoved, but on the other hand I thought that might just get him to fold, and I thought I could get some more value on the river. He just thinks for about 5 seconds and calls, and unfortunately we get the jack of clubs here on the river. So obviously we still have the nuts, that's great, but now I don't think that I can get a lot of value out of him. With any other card, pretty much, like if it hadn't been a club, I would have jammed, but I thought a jam just wouldn't cut it. But at the same time I thought a set of kings might still call me if I go something like this. I made it 190 to not sound too big, and it's still kind of like a third pot. So, and he thought and thought and thought, and unfortunately he folded in the end. So this one here is a really interesting one. We have a raise from the low jack and a call in the high jack. Ace jack offsuit, well, whilst it's not the greatest hand, I think this is a good squeezing hand here, especially because the low jack had raised a few times and normally folded to 3 bets. So I thought I have a good chance of getting this through, but players had other plans here. The big fish and the big blind, he just cold calls here, and then the low jack calls as well, and at least we lost the hijack, but still we're going 3 ways to a flop. The flop is not bad. We have top pair, decent kicker on this paired board, and now look at this big blind fish. He goes 30 into 146. He donks on a board where he should basically never donk. The low jack calls, and I think we have nothing else to do than call here. Raising would be a mistake because we would only get called by better hand. I say that, but well, actually the fish might even call with ace 4s or something like that, but I still think calling is the best way forward, and see what the turn brings. The turn is not great. We now lose to ace queen, we lose to queens. If someone had that, we lose to a 10 anyway, we lose to ace king anyway, and now the fish donks 50 again. He bets like so tiny. 5th pot. I mean, does he have pocket 10s, or does he have a weak ace, or what is he doing this with? The low jack calls again, and we're getting 1,000,000 to 1 now. Well, not quite, it's 7 to 1. We now have a gut shot to a straight. I just can't fold my top pair with a draw here, getting 7 to 1, so I'm just calling again. And now on the river we have 2 pair, but how good is this 2 pair when there are 2 10s on the board and a king makes a straight, and now the big blind fish makes it 125. Still not huge, but I mean, I was thinking if low jack folds now, I will be in a really tough spot, because I really don't know what to make out of the big blinds range in it. But thankfully we don't have to make that decision, because the low jack now shoves for 325, and I think this is an easy escape for us now. There is absolutely no way we are ever good here. We fold, and now the fish in the big blind goes into a tank for like a minute and a half, and he eventually folds face up, and he folds king queen, and the low jack has quad tens. Now, just looking back at this hand, the big blind, so he cold called a 3-bet with king queen offsuit, then he donked with a gut shot, then he bet again when he still had a gut shot and picked up second pair, and then he led the river when he finally made his trade, and then he folded to a fairly small jam with a straight. So I think there wouldn't be any way of playing this hand worse with a king queen offsuit. So the big blind is the same big fish. That was just the big blind in the previous hand with a king queen off, and here we have a limper. We raise it up to 15 in the hijack with pocket sevens, cutoff calls, and our friend in the big blind calls low jack folds. Jack 9-9, not a great board, but we are okay because it checks through. The 10, definitely not great, another overcard, but it checks through again. And now on this 8 river, we have the bottom end of the straight, and the big fish now goes 30 into 49. So that's the player who don't gut shot previously, just in the hand that we saw, and now he didn't do that. So I was thinking if he had a queen here, maybe he would have donked at some point. So I just thought we might be good, and especially with this sort of action, he could have anything now. I mean, he could have a jack, he could have 10-8, and so I called with the bottom end of the straight, cutoff folds, and we lose to a flopped full house. So that tells us something. This guy donks when he has a gut shot, and he plays a full house super passively and doesn't even go for max value on the river. I would probably have called a pot-sized bet here, to be fair. So he won the minimum, but on the other hand, I would never have called if he had bet earlier, so maybe he did win the maximum here, but still not a great play from him once again. So this is another hand reading exercise. We have a limper, we raise it up to 15, only the limper calls. We flop top pair, top kicker, definitely going for value here. I went 20, I could even have gone a little bit bigger, but okay, whatever. The jack is not great for us, but it's actually not bad for our range, because he shouldn't have a lot of jack X here when he calls the flop, unless it's jack X of clubs or jack 10 of something, in which case we're behind now. But I decide to just fire again and again. I think I could probably have made this one a bit bigger, but because I now didn't have top pair anymore, I thought I would go a bit smaller, still hoping to get calls from a 5, a 6, 7s, 8s, 9s possibly, or clubs. So we get called again, and now the 7 of clubs comes in, and this is one of the worst cards basically, because if you had a gut shot, if you had clubs, now they get there, so really not good. And by gut shot I mean a gut shot on the flop, like 8-9, that then becomes an open-ender on the turn and is now a straight. And he now bets half pot, and this is just such an annoying in-between size, because if he had made it bigger, this is a snap fold, I think. If it had made it smaller, then it's kind of a crying call, but it's never a fist pump call, even if he just makes it 35 or something like that. We definitely call there, because he could do that with king 10 or queen 10 or 10-9 or something like that. But here I just thought I don't beat a lot. I don't see any bluffs here, unless like maybe something like king queen, that's not clubs or so, but I just didn't think that we would be good even the 25% of the time. I just thought it's best to just fold. And this here was the most annoying hand of the whole session. We have a very bluffy lag, who is actually not a bad player, probably a winning player, but he just bluffs quite a bit. And then we have a really bad player here, calling that easy 3-bet with ace-king off, even in these early positions. Both players call, and unfortunately we really brick this one. They both check to me, and I was in two minds whether to bet or check here. Against one opponent I might have bet, but here I just decided that one of them is likely to have a pocket pair, and if not, we can pick up more equity on the turn, or we can call or go for a delayed c-bet, so I just checked here. Now when the 10 comes, that's not a great card because they can have quite a bit of 10s, both of them. And had it only been the bluffy under the gun player who bets out here, I would have raised here or at least called. But now this guy who I label as a fishy fish because he was really terrible, he just calls here. And now with this course of action, I just thought that I wanted to fold here. The thing is, I considered raising, but the problem is that, yes, I mean, obviously it would be as a bluff, but if someone has a 10 here, or even like pocket 9s, pocket 8s, pocket 6s or so, I would not be in great shape because I don't think they would actually fold here. Like, this guy is pretty sticky, the lag, and fishy fish, God knows. So I decided to fold, and then the 5 of hearts comes on the river. The bluffy lag now bets 200, and the fish now tanks for quite a while, and in the end he folds 5-6 of clubs, and that was a massive draw on the turn, so I understand why he called there. And now he folded when he just had the 5 there on the river. The under the gun player shows an absolute airball with ace deuce of spades. I'm not surprised by that, and in hindsight I folded the best hand on the turn, but yeah, it was really annoying to have lost this pot to the bluffy lag because of the turn draw that the fish had. But there is redemption, so a few minutes later I played this hand here, and I think I was still a little bit tilted, so I'm not super proud of it. But we have another really bluffy loose player here under the gun +1 who raised, and this guy has done a lot of crazy stuff, so this is not an under the gun +1 opening range here. And now we have the same bluffy lag who just bluffed me off my ace king in the previous hand. He calls. We have the same fishy fish this time on the button who calls, and I have ace jack offsuit, and I'm thinking like the bluffy lag would have raised here if he had a better hand than mine. The under the gun +1 can have all sorts of stuff, and the fishy fish, well, he just has rubbish here all day long. So I decided to go for the squeeze here, go pretty big 75, and I'm thinking that I'm probably gonna get rid of everyone here, but that doesn't happen. The loose bluffy original raiser calls, but the other two players at least get out of the way, and the flop is pretty good for my hand. Jack 9-3, I have top pair, top kicker. We have a pretty small SPR, so at this point I would either check or bet fairly big. I considered both because this loose bluffy guy could easily take a stab here, but I thought I will just go and bet out here with my top pair, top kicker. So I go a little over half pot, and now I face this pretty considerate, pretty big raise, and I had to tank for a while to just think what this might mean. So why on earth with such a small SPR and him in position, what hands would he raise for value here? Yes, maybe an overpair that he slow played, but other than that, I mean, would you really, if you had a set of 9s, a set of jacks, a set of 3s, would you really go like this now here and just let me fold all my bluffs? I didn't think so, so I just considered, especially at this low SPR, There was no way I would ever fold here, and if I'm not folding, I'm not gonna call here and leave 175 behind in a massive pot, so I just jammed here. He snap calls, board runs out with a 4 and a 10, no club. I have to show my hand obviously because I jammed and he just mucks. No idea what he had, maybe it was a club draw, but anyway, we are good here, so we double up and finish the session just 50 pounds down.